Again, welcome everyone. And again, as usual, we would start with trying to generate a good intention, motivation. And for that, try to quiet and calm your mind for a few moments by watching the breath. Then we can think, may coming us together and studying the lamrim, middle lamrim. May it become cause and condition to actualize the two bodhicitta mind. Relative bodhicitta mind and ultimate bodhicitta mind. And may it become cause and conditions to attain buddhahood as soon as possible. So we can be greatest help and benefit to each and every sentient beings in a skillful way according to individuals' needs. Okay. So then we can have the prayer. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the fourth destroyer, the completely perfect, the fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, the knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings, became teacher of God and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offering, and go for refuge. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dhamma refuge, homage to the Great Sangha, to all three ever devout homage, to all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all realms, atoms in all expect, with a supreme faith I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous action, perform only perfect virtuous action. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha, a star, a visual appreciation, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud. See conditioned things as such. Through this merit, may sentient beings attain the rank of all-seeing, subdue the four faults, and be delivered from samsara's oceans, perturbed by the wave of aging, sickness, and death. I prostrate to the Aryatipal Gem. Thus did I hear one time the Bhagavan was dwelling on the mass of vultures mountain in Raskaya together with great community of monks and great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan observed in the concentration of the categories phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the bodhisattva Mahasatva Arya Avalokeshwara look upon the very practice of profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregate, also empty of inherent nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasatva Arya Avalokeshwara: how should any son of the lineage train who wish to practice the activity of profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasatva Arya Avalokeshwara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wish to practice the activities of profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this correctly and repeatedly, beholding those 5 aggregate also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness form, emptiness not other than form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factor, and consciousness are empty. Said Buddha, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristic, unproduced, unsist, stainless, not without stain, not division, not fulfilled. Said Buddha, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factor, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no order, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. There's no I element and so on up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, so on and up to and including no aging and death and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattva rely on dwelling the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond era, they reach in point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the 3 times also manifestly, completely awakened to unsurprisable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurprised mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as the truth sin is not false. The mantra of perfection of wisdom declared Tata Om Gade Gade, Parakate, Parasam Gade, Bodhe Soha. Said Buddha, the Bodhisattva master should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from the concentration and commented the Bodhisattva master by Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it's like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagata rejoiced, the Bhagavan having thus spoken, the Venerable Shari Titi Pudra, the Bodhisattva master by Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding the entirely alone, the world of the gods, women, Asura, and Gandharva was overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. Maybe we can go to the next, yeah. This ground, another sa shi pe ke jong she me do da ri ra le shi ni de ge ba de sang ge shin do mi de u wa do gu na ma da shin la che ba sho ye dang gu ro ra na men da la ka ni ta ya mi. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merit I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all senses. Sangye Jodan Sangye Sonam La, Jangju Badu Dane Yabe, Dage Joje Gibe Sonam Gi, Dola Penje Sangye Doba. Sangye Jodan Sangye Sonam La, Jangju Badu Dane Yabe, Dage Joje Gibe Sonam Gi, Dola Penje Sangye Doba. Okay, so again, welcome and thank you for joining today's evening class. So I wonder what discussion you had from last week. Did you come to any kind of conclusions?
No, we just had a general discussion. We were leaving open all the different possibilities, talking about what it meant to be a person and so forth.
Okay. So I think, yeah, okay. Thank you. I think last week I kind of opened 2 questions, and one of them was why the selfness of persons is more easy to realize than the selfnesses of the phenomena. And so again, last week we had, I think, some different views, and according to some of the commentaries and the teachers, is that because in order to understand emptiness of any phenomena, first you have to understand the object, the phenomena itself. And so when we understand, trying to understand the persons, the definition of person is something, it is person is something that has been imputed on the aggregates. And so when you have understanding, even before you are understanding emptiness, you have this understanding, person mean imputed on aggregates. So you have a little bit of understanding imputing on something. And because you have a little bit of understanding, even though that when you understand that, you don't have the very kind of subtle understanding or merely imputed part, but still you already have some understanding that that object is imputed on the aggregates. And so because of that understanding help, then later, when we have subtle understanding of emptiness, that there's nothing exists from its own side, but it's merely imputed by the mind or the thoughts on the basis. And so that is why it is said that the sadness of persons is more easier than the sadness of phenomena, okay, according to the, again, that. So that is one of the questions. Still, it leads some other questions, but I think I will just leave it here at the moment, otherwise we get lost. And then the other questions was that we saw in terms of presenting and understanding selflessness, understanding of the selflessness of person is presented first because it's more easy to realize. But in terms of the ignorance cultivating in ourselves, here Lama Tsong was the ignorance of grasping the phenomena come first, and the grasping of the self, the person come later. So again, we kind of discussed a little bit. And again, I haven't seen very clearly in any kind of commentaries or anything on that. Why? As I mentioned in Nagarjuna, in Chandagiri, it seems to present the other way around, But then, I have been reflecting, contemplating, and my thinking is that when you have before you have the grasping of the self of the person, I or me, the persons, to our mind, when you think of I or me or self, the persons, or another persons, there is appearance of the aggregate of that persons. Whether you are seeing, you see the body, then you see, oh, that is him. Or you see your body, then there is a sense of me. Or then you have sense of your feelings, then there is sense of me. So before you have or whether you see it or whether you have the remember of yourself, when you think of me or self, the image first comes of one of your aggregate, either your body or your mind. And then after that, on the basis of that, then there is sense of me or self, So for us, ordinary, the moment there is the appearance of that, your aggregate, before the appearance of the self, there is already the appearance of inherently existing that aggregate. Not only there is inherently existing aggregate, there's already grasping of inherently existing of that aggregate. And so therefore, that is why for the ordinary being who have not realized the emptiness, so then that is how it, yes, Bob?
I would just make a comment. Actually, one of the commentaries that we have in our materials for this course actually mentioned exactly that same argument that you gave and agrees complete with what you said. It's like a person walks into a room, you see them first, you see their aggregates, So the you know, the phenomena sort of comes first. Then once you see the person walk into the room, then from there you go to the person.
Okay.
And so it's basically the same argument that you gave.
And which commentary was that? Do you remember?
God, I think I looked through. I think, you know, we've got many of them on our website now in the materials section.
Okay.
I think that, and then people should know that. I think when you sign up for the course now, if you go to our website, if you register for the course, they will send you an email with materials that gives a lot of different valuable tables and commentaries of other geshes who have given this course, and they've recorded it and transcribed it and written it down. And I don't know if it was Geshe Temple or I forget which one. I was going through them so fast, I forgot which one I read that in. But I can look it up and try to find it for you.
Okay. So anyway, so I think with that, I think maybe we kind of, you know, close the questions that we raised last week, you know, and then we'll continue. And again, I just want to remind again, when we study here, sometimes it looks like it is very philosophical, you know, feel like very philosophical, and feel like it is nothing to do with practice or meditations. But we have to remember these all are practice meditations. We are not just trying to learn a theoretical kind of philosophy. And so therefore, for example, last week we talked when we went the presentation by the Nagarjuna of where he does this analysis, and that is the meditations. That analysis and meditations, trying to see where is that inherently existing self. Is this within the you know, because when we talk of self, is it within our physical aggregates, or is it within our consciousness aggregate? If it's within our physical aggregate, is this the earth elements, or water element, fire elements, or wind element, or space element, or is this the consciousness element? So drawing that kind of analysis, trying to investigate, analyze, and that is the meditations. Okay, one way of meditating on emptiness, using that kind of analysis. So that itself is meditation. That itself is a practice. So I think if you remember, then we use that for meditations. Okay, so it's not just kind of theoretical that you can apply in your meditation or your practice. I think that is something I think crucial to remember. So then otherwise you think, oh, I'm not interested in theory, philosophy. Why I'm studying that? What is the use of this? You know, so that kind of misunderstanding can come, and then doesn't see the benefit of studying those. Seems like very philosophical, and seems like unimportant for the practice itself. You know, so that is something I wanted to kind of remind again, even though we did kind of discuss a little bit before. And then we continue, you know, I think we were in 236, and where it's commenting on the meaning of sutra that is said to be merely imputed on the aggregates. So that is the, you know, that's so in that sutra quoted, you know, in Chandrakiri's commentary middle way, there's 2 verses, 8 lines, and then Lama Tsongkhapa explained the meaning of down there. So without reading it, I just kind of summarize that, you know. The first verses explain about the emptiness of the persons, you know, that the persons is empty of inherently existing or ultimately existence. And then second line, so the first, not line, first verse explain that is empty of truly or inherently existence. That does the self that does not exist. Okay, there's no inherently existing self. Inherently or existing self or ultimately existing self is negated. Then the second verse, the next lines, 4 lines, it explains how the self exists. So it explains the self that exists. It negates the self that does not exist, and then there's a self that exists. So there's 2 kinds of self. Okay, and I think we have to understand that, and so that, and within the first verse, each line, in the first line is saying, the self-grasping ignorance is like the devil or demonic mind, because that is the root of all the sufferings. And then second line says, anyone who have that self-grasping ignorance is holding a wrong view, And then third and fourth line is, explaining that there is no inherently existing persons or self, And then in terms of the other lines, first 2 lines, then it says, give an example, analogies that just as chariot or car is imputed on the basis of many part of it, is merely imputed. In the same way, the person or the self is imputed on the collection of the aggregates. And so that kind of analysis, another meditations, another practice, how everything is merely imputed on the basis or coming the collections of the parts, collection of the part. And so here, it doesn't, Lama Tsongkhapa doesn't go so detailed here, but if you read this is the middle lamrim. If you read a great lamrim, then you will see much more extensive on this area here in terms of the 7 analysis of the chariot. There are 7 kind of analysis, examination of the chariot. That analysis come from, 5 of those analyses come from Nagarjuna, first 5 in his precious garland. And then on top of that last 2 analysis, the shape and the collections, that analysis then put by the Chandrakiri together. So then it come a 7 analysis. So it's an analysis, in terms of chariot or car, it was nowadays maybe car might be better example than the chariot, So seeing, whether the car is one with the parts of the car, or whether the car is separate from the its parts, or so that there's 2 analyses. And then, whether the car is dependent on whether dependent on its parts, or whether the parts are the depend of the car, and whether the car possess the collections or the parts, and whether the shape of the car is the car, whether the collection of the car is, so that kind of 7 analysis. And you do with the car, and then you apply that same to the persons. And Lama Tsongkhapa actually explained in that, so in that through that analysis, then we come to an understanding that the car is merely imputed on the basis of collections coming together. When you analyze in that 7 different way, you cannot find the car within the basis of the car. Therefore, the car cannot be found from its own side, from the objective side, because when you try to analyze within the object, the basis, you cannot find in that. And therefore, even though you cannot find within the basis, but we cannot kind of deny there is car, because the car is our direct experience. We can drive car to the work, and our car sometimes get broke. Sometimes we need to fix. So that is we cannot deny that direct experience. There's a car, but when you analyze it that way, we cannot find the car within its part, within the basis. And so therefore, then what is the car? The car is merely imputed on the basis of all these parts collection coming together, and it has certain functioning of that, and that is it. So it's merely imputed, merely designated. I think another example that if I can use, it helped me for me, sometimes I use that because, merely imputed, merely designated. Sometimes, they say everything, car or all objects are exist on the basis of known into the world, known in the world, or according to all conventionally or relatively. Okay, conventional or relatively. So in that cases, when you analyze, okay, it's the car's body, car. We always say the car's body is not a car, isn't it? When you use that kind of analyze, when you say it's the car's body car, we will say no, it's not car's car, it's the body of the car. When we analyze. But when you don't analyze with that kind of analysis, when you see the body of the car going, you say, oh, I saw the car. What you saw is actually the body of the car. And in conventional, in relatively, that's okay. Relatively, by seeing the body of the car, we can say we saw the car. Relatively, on conventional level. And that is known in the world. In our world, we communicate that way. I saw the car. And also the shape or color of the car is not car. When you analyze, okay? When we analyze the shape and color of, we say it's the shape of the car, it's the color of the car, it's not the car. But when we don't analyze, when we see the shape and color, we say, oh, it's a beautiful car, isn't it? It's a nice, beautiful car. That is how we communicate on relatively, on conventional level. And it functions that. On the basis of that, then we buy the car or we sell the car. Or we drive the car. There's all of that functionings and effect, And same way, the engine of the car. Normally, if you analyze it deeply, you say the engine of car is not a car. It's the engine of the car. But generally, we know that when engine is strong, you say the car is strong. In our conventional world, in our relatively, that's how we communicate. On the basis of the engine being, so when we don't analyze in that way, then on conventional world, on relatively, we communicate that way, and that is, in same way we apply that to same ourselves. It's same way. My body is not me. But when I see my body, I say, oh, I'm coming. Or I see your body, and they say, oh, John is coming. I saw John. Or someone hit my body, even though my body is not here, but I say, oh, someone hit me. Even my body is not me, when my body get big or small, I say, I become big or small, whatever, So that when we don't analyze that on conventional world, on the relative world, that is how and it functions that way. And that is correct in conventional relative way, When someone hit my body, to say I was hit on conventional world, on relative world, that is correct. But if we go further than that and analyze more deeply, then that is not correct. Because my body is not me. So ultimately, so you see that is, so I think that, and same with our consciousness, if we use consciousness, when your memory remember, which is the mind, consciousness, we say, I remember. Even the memory is not you. But on conventional, on relative, the known in the world, that is fine. But on ultimate level, if you go further than that, and if you analyze more deeper, then it's not correct. And same, you know, when my mind is happy, I say I'm happy. When my mind is not unhappy, I say I'm unhappy. Even though my mind is not me, even though my feelings are not me, you know. And when someone's mind is, you know, kind, compassion, we say that person is compassion, kind person. When someone is, you know, where their mind is where their mind is angry, then we say that person is angry, even though that person is not that mind. So in a conventional, in a relative world, that is correct, and that is okay, and that is how we can communicate in that. And so I think when you understand that, you know, to me, you know, I kind of sometimes use this kind of analysis, logic, and to me it makes sense. When you find in scriptures where they say, you know, why it does not exist ultimately when you analyze it, but when you don't analyze it on conventional, it exists in that way. It functions in that way. And same way when they say, you know, things exist according to the what is known to the world. And so that is what it means, you know, our ordinary unanalyzing world, you know, in that kind of. Yes, Matthew, did you want to say something? Yes.
If this is the right time, I'm interested in how to make that jump from a pretty clear logical understanding to an actual direct realization. And, you know, in meditation, is it just continuing with that line of logical thought and reasoning, you know, with a calm mind, or is it also just a combination of being in samatha and you know, just a calm mind, still mind, and letting the insight come on its own, some combination of those?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, I think there are two different ways of approach to that. Sometimes there is two approach. One approach can saying, you know, from the view, the meditations, and there is approach from meditation, the view. Okay, when we say, you see that kind of terms in scriptures, from the view to emptiness, meditation and meditation to view. In terms of meditation to view, first you have shamatha. That is meditation. First you have the shamatha, calm mind, shamatha. On the basis of that shamatha, then you do the analysis. So then you have the special insight, the wisdom, realizing the emptiness. That is one approach. For certain people, they take that approach. For some other practitioners, first they have the view. Through that kind of analytical meditations, analyzing, they have the understanding of the emptiness, the view. Once they have the understanding of emptiness view, then they try it on the basis of that, they use that view, understanding, realization as a way to develop shamatha, karma abiding. So it can be kind of approached both ways. It depends on individuals, you know. So it can be developed either way. And again, I don't know, you know, if we take a kind of His Holiness Dalai Lama's words literally, you know, of course, it's hard to know. Sometimes you can't take everything literally, you know. Sometimes he can be very kind of trying to be just a humble, you know, and but very often he has said, you know, especially in recent times, you know, he said that he have a realization of emptiness. And because of that, hardly any delusion arises. And even in delusion arises, it is just like momentary. Hardly any delusion arises, but if it does arises, it's very momentarily, it doesn't last. and it is through the realization of emptiness. And he said he had been, reflecting, contemplating through study and reflecting, contemplating over 30, 40 years. And through that, he has been able to reach that point. And with his own experience, he said it's something possible. He said that he didn't have that experience before. So it is something that he himself said there's something from his own experience that is something possible. But what he did say is that he didn't have the time to develop shamatha. He wished that he had time, free time to really dedicate himself to develop the shamatha, but because of his responsibility for the Tibetan people and all other things to others in terms of teaching and giving advice, through that he couldn't get the time that you really need quiet time, long period of time to develop shamatha. And so he mentioned, he has the bodhicitta, he has the developed bodhicitta and wisdom realizing emptiness, but he did mention, he didn't have the shamatha. And so he said if he had a shamatha, he would be in the second level of the bodhisattva path, the path of preparation. But he said because he don't have shamatha, he is in the first path, the path of accumulation, So whatever, whether that he is being very humble or he's being very honest, whatever is, either way, it just shows there is a way that you can develop wisdom, realizing emptiness without shamatha. And so also in many of the classical older scripture, you always find that term from meditation to view and view to meditation, two different approach. So yeah. Okay. So we were just talking about how just as the car is merely imputed on the collections of all its parts, and then it has certain functioning. Same way the persons is collections of persons merely imputed on the basis of the collection, the aggregates, collection aggregate, and it has certain functioning of that on the basis of that. So I think that is where this is another meditation. So one meditation, we talk about the Nagarjuna, where, where trying to find with the aggregates, each of those element factors and consists of them. And also, so that is one way of doing it. But here also 7 analysis, 7 different analysis that if you are interested, you can read in Je Tsongkhapa's great lamrim on in this part. He goes more detailed in the 7 analysis. Of course, you can also find in Chandrakiri's as well. So that is, I think that is another meditation. So it is not a philosophy; it is a meditation. Okay, I think it's important to, because very often we study and then after some time student ask, but how to meditate? And we have been studying that. We have studied and we have finished all of that. And the techniques are here, how to meditate, how to analyze, how to investigate, let's say in emptiness here, with a different logic or different analysis. And you can use any of the reasoning logic that you find most beneficial and helpful for you. Certain logic might be more effective for certain individuals than others. And if you use, sometimes one logic might not be effective, but another logic might be effective. So you can use those different approach, different analysis and investigation, and that is the meditation. So the meditation, how to meditate is already explained here, okay? So it is not like they are trying to find somewhere else another instructions. These are the instructions. Yes, Bob? Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that since you talked about the lamrim Chenmo, the great lamrim, the really big one, that's actually published in a wonderful translation in 3 volumes. However, the thing that's really amazing is Geshe Sopa, who just died recently. He was a Larampa Geshe, and professor at University of Wisconsin. He published a 5-volume commentary on the great lamrim Chenmo. And the 5th volume of that is all on insight. And I think it's the clearest explanation of anything I've ever, it's the most amazing Buddhist books I've ever seen are these commentaries by Geshe Sopa. They're so clear. And so if you want to really learn about these, the analysis of the chariot and so forth, I think it's called Path to Enlightenment. I forget the exact title, something like that. But it's really just an amazing book. And so if you want to learn about the details of what Lama Tsongkhapa talked about in the Lamrim Chenmo, I would highly recommend this commentary by Geshe Sopa. It's really quite an amazing book or series of books.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so again, I have to remind all the time when you are studying Nagarjuna's, Chandrakirti's, and here Lama Tsongkhapa, especially when it comes to emptiness, sometimes it feels like it is too theoretical, too philosophical. It seems like it is not practical, but actually it is the meditation, it is the practical. You know, so as long as you know how to do it and it explain it. So I think I'm trying to remind all the time, you know, because I often get that kind of caution very often after we study all of that. Then again, you know, but how to meditate, you know, as though the meditation is something separate from this ones, you know. And I think the next, you know, I think, I don't know whether I need to go so much. It's basically saying, you know, the aggregate and the continuum aggregate, they are not the persons, but they are the basis for the person to impute it, you know. So because on the basis of aggregate, then persons imputed as persons on the basis of aggregate. Therefore, that's the basis of imputing, and that's something that is imputed cannot be same. Okay, so it's the car is the basis for imputing a car, and the car is that has been imputed. So these are two different. It can't be same. So therefore, as in the sutra, it says the person is imputed on the basis of collection of aggregates. So therefore, the collection of aggregates itself and the continuity of aggregates itself is not the persons. But even though it is not the persons, you know, even you might see in some sutras, as if you take literally, it's in some sutra, it seems like it is explained the aggregate to be a person. But here Lama Tsongkhapa clarified the meaning of that, you know. That meaning of it, in some sutra where it seems literally, it seems like saying that the aggregate of the person. What it is saying is that the person which has been imputed on the basis of aggregates is the observed objects of the self. So that is, so Lama Tsongkhapa trying to make sure that those two different sutras does not contradict, you know, it doesn't contradict. If you look similarly, it might look like contradictions if you take literally. Yes, please, Bob.
So just one small point here. For people who are reading the text, this paragraph that Geshe is talking about has a typo in it in the PDF file that many of you are using, where it reverses the meaning. So I got that from comparing the new printed book with the PDF text. And where that occurs is at the bottom of page 236, the third line up from the bottom. According to the PDF file, it says, and it is not illogical for the basis. And in the printed version, it changes the word illogical to logical. So it actually reverses the meaning of that sentence. So if you were confused reading that one sentence, it was a typo. Okay, that was the only typo I found, but I only looked briefly. And I guess that's an advantage of the the new published version of the text as they cleaned up some of the typos. So that's all.
Thank you for sharing that, because I was reading in English, I get confused. I couldn't make sense of it. When I read the Tibetan, it makes sense, but maybe I thought maybe I didn't know the English well enough to really to make that sense, So anyway, thank you for clearing that. And then they explain the basis, the object of the innate grasping of the self, the innate, grasping of the self. And that when we talk about, there is two objects, okay, of that grasping of the self. There is observed object and there is apprehending object. The observed object is the person that's merely imputed on the aggregate, on the basis of aggregate. That's the self that exists. Okay. And then apprehensive object is that the self that does not exist, that grabs that self to be inherently existing. And that is the apprehending self, grasping the self to be inherently. And that is the self that does not exist. Okay. And we have to distinguish these two things. Je Tsongkhapa here says, if we don't make that distinguishing, then you might be saying, sometimes they say there's no self, sometimes they say there is self, and it can be very confusing. Do you get it? When you study Buddhism, they say there is no self, selfless. They talk about all the time selfless, but at the same time, they say there is a self relevantly or relatively or conventionally on conventional level. So you think, what is going on, And so we have to differentiate two different self. One self that is being negated and one self that is being ascertained or approved or established. And the self that is being negated is the object, apprehensive objects of that, that is the self that is grasping the self to be inherent existence. So the inherent existing self is that object, and that is to be negated. And the observed object, that is the self that's merely imputed on the basis of aggregate. That's the self that exists. So I think if we make those two distinguishing, then you wouldn't be confused when there's of that. Otherwise, you might be confused and thinking, what is going on? One moment they say there's no self, another moment they say there's self, So those two are different self, okay? Two different self. You have to understand there is two different self. One self that is being negated and one self that is not being negated because it exists on conventional relative level. And the self that is being negated, it not only exists on ultimately, it doesn't also exist on relatively as well. The self that is being negated, okay? The self that is negated is self that not only does not exist ultimately, but it also does not exist relatively. But our ignorant mind grabs and believes to be exist, but which is totally false and wrong and mistaken, So that is where hence the need for differentiating between the self exists and the self that does not exist, So, yeah. Yeah, so I think, again, to just repeat that, to have more clarity, the self that does not exist is inherently existing self, okay? The self that exists is the self that's merely imputed on the basis of aggregate. So those two things. So the empty of inherently existing self and the self that exists conventionally or relatively is the true truth, is the true truth. So you cannot ignore each of the truth, the empty of inherent existing is the ultimate truth, and the conventionally existing self is the, so you cannot negate either of those true truth. The true truth goes hand in hand, complementing each other's. The understanding of the self that's merely imputed on the aggregate or the basis help us to understand the self is not inherently existence. And the understanding of self is not inherently existing help us to understand how the self is merely imputed on the basis. So, each of those understanding supplement and help each others. So then, next one is, presenting the, again, the selflessness of persons and the selflessness of the mind, and then and the selflessness of the showing how independent on that person appear like the illusions. So from 3 point of view, and then in presenting the selflessness of persons, again here another reason, use another reasoning logic, So in here it is taught through 4 analysis or 4 essential analysis, So in the first one, the first essential point is, regarding to examine one's own continuum within our own mind, so as to identify manner appearing to self, the person that is explained earlier. So first point is identifying the self that is being negated, okay? In these 4 essential points, there is 4 essential points in these meditations, in this analysis, okay? In this particular analysis, examination, meditation, there are 4 essential points of analysis. The first point is identifying the object of negations, okay? And in order to identify the object of negations, which we are trying to negate when we talk about selfless, so negating particular self, to identify that, of course, we can say, it is the self that is inherently existing that is being negated. That is just a word. Do you get it? It is just a word. When I'm explaining now, when I'm saying identifying the self to be negated, the self that we said there is no self. When we say, I can say it is the inherently existing self, ultimately existing self, truly existing self, but it is just a word. In order to really identify it, then you have to really meditate within your mind stream, within your mind continuum. And here Lama Tsongkhapa is not explaining here so much because he has already explained earlier. So when he said he explained earlier, it is saying in Lamrim Chemo, the great lamrim. He wrote the great lamrim first, and then he wrote this later. So since he has already wrote more detail in the lamrim, the greater lamrim, so he's not going to repeat it here. But I think it is important for us to kind of go through a little bit here to have that little bit understanding. So the advice is giving is for example, in order to really see how that self appear to the self that to be negated, how it appear to our mind. It is like when you are trying to destroy your enemy, you have to identify the enemy correctly. Otherwise, you are trying to destroy the enemy, but you might be destroying someone else. You miss the target. Same way, we have to identify correctly the self that we are trying to negate, and that we have to identify through our own experience, not just through the words. The words are as tools to help us to deal with our experience. And so in that cases, the example is giving, maybe you can think, imagine, you stay on meditate on your cushions, so you calm down your mind, settle down your mind, then you can generate a good intention, motivations, with all the meditations, every meditation you do, you quiet your mind, then generate good intention, bodhicitta motivations, and then if possible, you try to have the, generate your guru, inseparable from the Buddha, visualize that, and then you take refuge, bodhicitta, and then you can do refuge and bodhicitta, and then 7 limb practice. You can do short, long, extensive, it doesn't matter, depending on your time and all of that. So you can do the short one, maybe you can do short mandala as well. And then you make a heartfelt request to the Guru Idam or the Buddha to help us, to inspire us, to bless us, to have these realizations, and with that request, then you can do some visualizations of lights, nectar, which is enlightened wisdom, but in the form of light and nectar, cleansing and purifying all your negativities, all the delusion, all the obscuration, especially here, the obscuration to understand the emptiness, because we are trying to here, because we are meditating on emptiness. So you change that slightly, especially here, then, all the obscuration to have a direct realization of emptiness has been, especially that has been clear and purified. And then again, you visualize, more enlightened wisdom in the form of, yellow, orange light, nectar, filling your whole body, receiving all the blessings of body, speech, and mind, and all the realization. And here, especially the realization of wisdom, realizing emptiness. So you try to do that, and after you do that, then you do the meditations, the main body of the meditations. So, and here in this particular where we are now, then first is, you try to think, maybe you can think someone you hate most, you dislike most in this world, it could be political leader, it could be an individual that, that you have conflict in your life, you can think of that person in front of you. Sometimes maybe the moment you think of that, you already get upset, it already kind of started to your mind started to kind of, boil, and so then, you think of that person, visualize, imagine that person in front of you, and then, criticizing you, being harsh, blaming you for everything that you have not done, without any reason, logic, without any reasoning, blaming everything to you for something you have done nothing. So you can imagine that person, yelling, blaming, criticizing, with all kind of harsh words. And then you have strong emotions response, allow that strong emotional response, sense of feeling that I have been accused. I have been accused. I have been, abused. So that is how you feel, this person is abusing me. This person is humiliating me. This person is, so, and there's a sense of I or me that has been humiliated. I or me that has been, abused. I mean that has been criticized, hurt and harm. So there is a strong sense of I at that moment. And analyze, when you have that strong sense of I, how does that I appear to your mind at that moment? Does that I appear as an I that's merely imputed on aggregates? Or does that appear there's a sense of solid I coming from, that your aggregates or from the object? There's a sense of strong inherently existing I, solid I that has been abused and so forth, whatever. So that is where you have to really analyze that. How does I appear at that moment? Normally, when we don't have that strong emotion and strong sense of self, it's hard to identify that self, the self that is being imputed. Because when I'm saying, I'm going for a drink, I'm going for a bathroom now, I don't have that strong sense of self, even though there's a sense of self, but there's not strong sense of self. When there's not strong sense of self, it's hard to identify that self. Okay? So that is the meditation, and that is what you would try to do. That is the first step. The first analyze, first meditations, identifying the self to be the reputed or reputed or negated, the self, identifying the self negating through your own experience. Through your own experience. Through your own experience. It's very important. Another way of analyzing it, I find helpful for me is, like when you have strong delusions, whether it's anger, whether it's attachments, where does that anger or attachment comes? It comes from some kind of, fabricating mind. Fabricating mind. And where does that fabricating mind come? That comes from that fundamental ignorance of self-grasping. And so if you try to really analyze, you see, when there is a sense of me or I or self, there is the appearance of a me or I or self from its own side, as though it is within my aggregates from that object, that basis, within that object, there's sense of I or me self from coming from objective, from the object, from its own side, inherently. And so once you started to, not only there is appearance, the next moment, your mind is grasping that way or apprehending that way, the way it appeared to us. Without kind of analyzing, there's appearance, and on the basis of that appearance, our mind just kind of apprehend or grasps that way. And then there is strong grasping to that self. That strong grasping, that self. So once you have that strong grasping to self, because you believe there is such self as from its own side, because you believe there is a true self from its own side. So you have strong grasping. And because you have that strong grasping on the belief that there is true self from its own side, then, you get attached to that self. Then self-cherishing comes. And you get attached to that self. And when you get attached to that self, then, you think, anything that has harmed that self in the past, anything that is harming the self now, anything that might have harmed, we think that might harm in the future, or anything that has been unkind to that self in the past or now that might happen in the future, anything that is having not been helpful to that self in the past, present, futures, and anything that has brought pain and suffering in the past, present, and future, we started to dislike that object. We started to have aversion to that object, unhappy about that object, and aversion, anger arises. Aversions, anger, hatred, all this arises. Resentment and all of that. So first there's that set grasping. On the basis of that set grasping, then our mind fabricate, oh, he was so bad, he or she was harmful in the past, he or she is harming me now, he or she might harm me in the futures, or he or she has been unkind in the past, or he or she is unkind now, or he or she might be unkind. So all of that our mind create, our mind fabricate in that way, make up. On the basis of that, then anger arises. And same way, it is the other way around, or we might think, oh, that object has been, that I would say, provide me happiness in the past, is providing me happiness in the now. It will provide happiness in the futures. So we get attached to that object. Or that object has been very helpful in the past, is helping me now, might be helpful in the futures. That has been beneficial in the past, or is benefiting now, or it might be benefiting in the futures. On the basis of that, our mind create all these kind of stories, fabricate and project, and on the basis of that, then we get attached to that object, clinging to that object. Check it out with your own experience. How does that is very important to understand with our own experience instead of just relying on the word from the books. Otherwise, sometimes we might be just repeating the word, but nothing changes because we are just repeating the word. Oh, it is not truly existent, it's not inherent existence, and so on. We just repeat that word, but really doesn't really kind of have any kind of really transformations because we haven't understood experientially how that works. And that is where the meditation, we have to do that experientially, and through that, then really identifying what exactly is that self that we are trying to negate, that we are trying to refute. What exactly that self, when Buddha said there's no self, what exactly that self, when the Nagarjuna and all these masters said there is no self. So it is not that we are just repeating their word, because otherwise we might be just repeating their word. So then experientially, you are just not repeating, you are using their word and their practice as a tools to go yourself, deep in yourself, and understand your experientially from yourself, within yourself. So that is the first point. That is very important point. And, some of the, like there is many practice, and like one of the example is Je practice. There is something called Je practice. And supposedly you go to the, cemeteries in the night, and then, invoke all the spirit, and then make offering of your bodies to them, So that is part of that job. The main purpose of that practice is actually to identify that self. Because when you are in a cemetery that is surrounded by spirit, you could have a lot of fear. And so there is a lot of fear. When you have strong fear, there's a sense of me that might be, harm and hurt. And when you have that strong sense, when you have that strong fear, there's a strong sense of that self, and then it is easy to identify that self. And a lot of time, our meditations, even we might have been trying to meditate on emptiness for a long time, sometimes we inevitably be so effective because we are losing the target, because we have not really identified the self that is being refuted or negated. So some of the masters say, they give different example in different, some example they say, even though the animals in the forest, you are looking for the footprint somewhere else, the opposite way, so you are not being able to accomplish that. Or, if there is a spirit harm from the south, you are trying to do the ritual to dispel that in the north, towards north, so it is not going to benefit that. And so same way, we really, to kind of hit the target, to hit the really target, we have to really identify that self that is being refuted, or to be refuted or to negate it. So I think that is very crucial point. It's very crucial point. I think a lot of time we miss that point, and therefore even we do all other analysis, all other examinations, still we struggle to have direct realizations, because either we go too extreme, nihilism, then we start to think, oh, there's no self, and we become nihilism. We do those analysis, those meditations, those kind of examination, and then we come to a point where we feel like, oh, then there's no self. Then there's a danger of being to extreme of nihilism. Or sometimes we try to do this meditation, but it doesn't really shake that truly ignorance that is grasping truly existence, self, because we haven't really identified that. So therefore, then I think also in the middle lamrim, and especially long in the great lamrim, Je Tsongkhapa explained when the negation that if it's too much, you do over negation, you do analyze overly, then it lead to it. It doesn't lead to the result. It leads to one extreme. But if you don't do enough analysis, then again you cannot complete everything in that. It cannot destroy the subtle, even though you might be able to destroy some of the gross self-grasping, but you might not be able to destroy the more subtle grasping, subtle ignorance. And so that is when we miss the exact, to identify exact that self to be negated. So I think that is the first point. And the second point, the second is a decision. If the person isn't established, it must be established either with one entity or two. So that is, so now you have in first point, essential point, you have identified the, through your own experience, identify the self that is negated or refuted. What is going to be refuted or negated? The self that does not exist, but our ignorance and belief that it exists, so that. Second is, if there's the analyze, then second analyze, if there is inherently existing self as it appear to our mind and to our ignorance, then, we have to, when we analyze, it has to be found. If something truly existing, when you go deeper analysis, it has to be more clear and clear, and you have to be able to find. If something is not true, it is a false. You don't, when you do deeper analysis, it doesn't have to find. You don't have to find because it's false. But if something is true, truly existent, the more deeper investigation you do, the more clarity you need to have, and you should be able to find it. So that kind of analysis. So if there's inherently existing self, then it has to be, either inherently existing one with the aggregate, or separate from the aggregates. There are two different ways of doing it. In some scriptures, they call, one with this singular, or one with the aggregate, and many aggregates. Many with the aggregates. In some others, is either one with the aggregate or separate from the aggregate. Okay, that kind of analysis. And again, it is important. It has to be either of that. There is no third possibility. Okay, because if it's third possibility, even when you analyze and you say it's not one with the aggregate and it's not separate from the aggregate, but maybe there's other possibility. You cannot come to the certainty with that conclusions. So in order to come to that certainty conclusion, then you have to have that convictions through understanding that either it has to be one with the aggregate or whether it has to be separate from the aggregate. There's no third possibility. Yeah. So that is the second essential point, to have that certaintiness of that. Otherwise, your meditation is still your mind, maybe not here, but maybe it is somewhere there, because you again your mind started saying there is other possibility. Well, it is not one with that, is not separate from that, but maybe there is somewhere else, or there's other possibility. So then it cannot lead to that exact conclusions and understanding, correct understanding. And so therefore, for that, then we have to be, and that generally speaking, yeah, if we analyze other things, anything, if I say, it has to be either one with something or it is separate from others. It can't be the other third. Is there any third? There's no third possibility. Either is one with some of whatever object that is, either is one or it is separate from that object. So have that. And so before we do the other examinations, whether then after that, then we do whether is one with the aggregate or whether is separate from the aggregates. So then that analysis come, third and fourth points, So I think maybe that one, we will discuss next time. I think today we went through the first two essential points. And yeah, so any questions, any comments? Does anyone any questions, comments?
So it seems as though the process is largely just a continuously exposing yourself to the idea and continuously testing on the cushion, off the cushion, to change the conditioned pattern of how you have felt reality has been forever.
Mm-hmm.
And just really get to the point where you just change the paradigm, or you change what you feel inherently to be the case. You're constantly exposing the mind and constantly challenging that inherent gut feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, and I think, yeah, and analyze through that kind of exposing yourself on the cushion, as you say, of the cushions. If you are mindful, especially when you have strong emotions, whatever emotion it could be, sometimes we might have strong fear, sometimes we might have a strong anger, sometimes we might have strong jealousy, pride, whatever. When we have strong emotions, and from the one side of our mind, if we can watch, observe that, and that is where we can be able to identify that self that is being negated better, But it is not easy, you know. A lot of time when you have done a strong emotion, we are completely lost in that. There's no mindfulness. There's no awareness in that. You are totally drawn into that emotions. You become that emotions. And then there's no way that we are able to observe from the side of our mind. But for certain individuals, if they practice to be more mindful, more awareness all the time, and they have that skills and that kind of practice, and then even when they have strong emotion, still they can apply that practice, and still while they are with that strong emotion, at the same time they could have that through that awareness that's from the some corner of that mind where it can observe, where it can be watching, where it can be aware of that. And so I think that is so of the cushions in our everyday experience when you have strong different, it could be bad emotion, it could be a good emotion, but there is sense of strong feeling of self, me, I, you know, when there is that strong feeling. So, and then of course in the cushions, then we have to imagine, you know, because we are not in the real world. And for some people, it might be a little bit challenging to build up that strong emotions, you know, through that kind of visualization or imaginations. The best would be if we can apply that actually in the real world when you are in real emotions. So then we are not just imagining or visualizing, but actually we are in that really state of mind. And then at that time to be able to apply that, you know, would be very strong and helpful if we can do that. Yeah.
So when that comes up, when that strong emotion comes up and you can kind of get your finger on it, then the idea is to really, really focus the attention on that and observe it and see where it seems to originate from, or perhaps how it changes. I guess the idea would be to ultimately observe it as being impermanent.
The idea is on the first level is to identify how does that self appear to our mind at that moment.
Yeah.
So we can identify. If we identify that and we know that, oh, that self is not kind of, you know, it doesn't appear the self with our own experience, okay? It doesn't appear that it's merely imputed self, the merely imputed on aggregate self that is appearing that moment. But there's more than that. There's appearance inherently existing self, or there's appearance of self that is existing from its own side, or from objective side, objectively from the aggregates, whatever. And so if we identify that, then when we do the other meditation, other analysis, then we know that that is what we are trying to destroy, and not a self that exists, that is merely imputed on that. So then we don't get confused with those two self. One self we are trying to destroy, which does not exist, but our ignorance believe exists, and then the one self that we don't want to destroy, that exists. So then we don't get confused with those two self. And so then when we do analyze, then it becomes more effective and powerful and to the point. So that is, then on top of that, then of course, then you can do, you know, different analysis, you know, if it's inherently just existing, then it can't be, it will be permanent, it can be impermanent, but actually it is impermanent, it's changing, and you can be aware of that. And so different analysis that you can do, you know, and the analysis that he's may explain here, you know, whether it is with the one with aggregates or separate from aggregate, or some other analysis that Nagarjuna explained, or which we already explained, kind of two different kind of analysis with the 7 point of analysis. We can do that. We can do the other Nagarjuna, whether it is last time that we discussed about analyzing whether it's the 5 elements or consciousness and so on. So whatever different analysis, you know, there are many different analyses that we can use. We can use any of those analyses once. So, and once we are aware of that, then we begin to understand how that mind is ignorance and how that mind is mistaken. At the moment we say ignorance, mistaken mind, false mind, but we really doesn't know experientially. We are just repeating the words. We are just repeating what is in the scriptures. And we learn that and we're just repeating, but with our own experience, we don't know how that ignorance, how that mind is ignorance, how that is mistaken, how that is false, that kind of grasping or that kind of apprehending is false. Sometimes it's just, we're just repeating the word, but it's not really kind of experientially, we recognize it is a false mind. It is a mistaken mind. So I think it helps us to identify that. Once we are able to really experientially recognize it is a false, is a mistaken, then we know why all other delusion come from that and how it come from that. And we also realize because that fundamentally, how all the delusion from that, and that is mistaken mind, because we know experientially with our mistaken mind, because we know is mistaken, is ignorance, is false, then we begin to see, oh, that can be overcome because it's a mistaken mind. It's not based on truth, it's based on false. So therefore you begin to see, oh, delusion can be overcome because we can overcome that fundamental ignorance, and delusion come from that. And therefore, the nirvana is possible, enlightenment is possible. So then again, enlightenment is just not a word. And again, it's just not, we are not just repeating because our teacher says or because the scripture says, but experientially now you begin to feel, oh, it is possible. It is possible. So it gives you a lot of confidence and courage in your practice once you feel that. Okay. So we'll do the dedications, yeah. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen, arise and grow. And may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. May all beings everywhere plagued by the suffering of body and the mind obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtues of my merit. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or evil fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see form and the deaf hear sound. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored, finding repose. May the naked find clothing, hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drink. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains, bountiful harvest. May all medicine be effective and wholesome prayer bear fruit. It seems like at the moment where our prayer, may there be a timely rain and bountiful harvest, seems to be at the moment in New Mexico. May all who are sick and ill quickly be free from all the elements, whatever disease they are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease be afraid and those bound be free. May the powerless find power and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewels, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparable kind things in Gaswa Abyss, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Tu tu chang xin chang wen jia wei ten zin zhong bei wei kun se to bo de chuo song gu wei le mo tu tu a dao so du jie kun du sha ten. Thank you very much. Okay, Venerable One, to whose kindness exists that who serve as a bountiful. Venerable One, to whose kindness exists that all conquer for those who wander in far off places, especially west, mindful of your loving concern for us, in intentionally descending again into a family of far distant land. We make this request, O Lama, please stay long. So again, thank you very much, everyone. And again, I think I spent quite a bit of time, even though we didn't go too many pages in terms of that, but I think it's important because just to remind you, this is the practice. We are not just studying just kind of philosophy and theory that is not related with the practice and meditations. And because a lot of time, I think, as I mentioned already before, we study and people, again, come and ask questions, but how to meditate? Teach us how to meditate. I don't know how to meditate. And even though we just discussed how to meditate. So I want to make sure that this is meditation and how to meditate. And really we know that this is meditations. We are not just learning kind of abstract theory and philosophy, you know. So yeah. Thank you and have a wonderful discussions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Geshe. That was very enlightening. Thank you.